So we must take a look at some of the reaction from Spain. Enough to make you cry, say Diario AS, with a picture of Karim Benzema with his head in his hands. Marca going with one of those beatings that hurt. Catalan press, very happy, you could say, with this one. Mundo Deportivo, knockout with a thrashing. Sport also saying a thrashing for Real Madrid. Let's welcome in Alex Kirkland from Madrid then, shall we? Alex, great to have you on the show. Give us some of the reaction. What has been the reaction in the Spanish capital to this defeat?
Can't you? The reaction has been pretty frenzied and a little bit over the top here. And it's understandable, because when you get a game like that, a result like that, a performance like that from Real Madrid, of course it's panic stations. Of course there's a tendency to overreact and say, you know, the coach has got to go, the team's no good, the players have got to go. I'm not sure personally that that's the right reaction. I think maybe a better way to look at this would be to say that this is a Real Madrid team in transition. It's a Real Madrid team that has actually overperformed over the last couple of years, that overperformed by winning the Champions League last season. And that set, of course, high expectations, which haven't then been met this season. But nonetheless, people are looking certainly at Ancelotti, because, as is always the case at Real Madrid, for any manager, it doesn't matter if you're Ancelotti, if you're Zidane, if you're Del Bosque, if you end a season and you haven't won La Liga and you haven't won the Champions League, there is very serious scrutiny on you and your position.
And let's get to that as well, can we, Alex? Because Sid Lowe's been talking about this today in his Guardian column. This whole situation with Ancelotti last night. He was asked in the press conference about whether this should cast doubt over his future at the club. He said, I refer you to what the president, Florentino Perez, said 15 days ago after they won the Copa del Rey, where he said Ancelotti has a contract until 2024. I don't want to talk about his future. There seems to be something of a stalemate between the two. Is it who blinks first? Why isn't one making a move before the other?
Yeah, it's a very interesting situation, isn't it? And actually, I think Carlo Ancelotti is in a pretty fantastic position, because I think next season, either he's going to be coaching Real Madrid or he's going to be coaching Brazil. You know, either he's going to be in charge of the biggest club in the world or the most iconic side in international football. And it's not a bad situation to be in, given this very public interest in him for the Brazil national team job. It's an interesting one. I thought Ancelotti's comments, as you say, kind of putting the ball in Florentino Perez's court was extremely interesting. Ancelotti, the fact is, look, he loves the city of Madrid. He loves working at Real Madrid. This kind of late career swan song for him was so unexpected for everybody, including him. And it's gone so well, at least until now. So he's in a fantastic position. If he stays, and he might stay, because I think Madrid have had a look at the market and they're not necessarily convinced by any alternatives right now. There are some candidates they really like. They really like Xabi Alonso, for example, at Leverkusen, but it's probably too soon for him. But they're not convinced, and so it may be the case they keep Ancelotti in charge for next season. His contract runs until 2024. And Ancelotti, I think, would be fine with that, even if at the same time he's quite tempted, and of course, why wouldn't he be, by the prospect of potentially going and managing Brazil. So I think it's a bit of a win-win as far as Ancelotti is concerned. I don't think the club have taken a definitive decision right now, because even though Florentino Perez said just 2 weeks ago, Ancelotti's our man, we know how quickly things can change. And this result last night was a real blow for sure.
What are your thoughts on the future of Ancelotti, Gab? Because as Alex says there, it's a win-win for him, even though he didn't win the Champions League this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think Alex kind of nailed it there from my perspective. I'm a little bit surprised, because I think if you're Florentino, if you're Real Madrid, and I say this with the greatest, as you know, I have a lot of love and respect for Ancelotti. If he stays, he's only going to stay another year. And I think there's some serious rebuilding to do. I think it is time to transition now. You know, Benzema, Modric, Kroos, you want to be sentimental and bring them all back next year and have another go at the Champions League for old time's sake? Sure. But, you know, they're all going to be a year older if you do that. And so maybe I would have thought the more rational thing to do would be saying, all right, you know, the rebuild starts now. We start ushering these guys out, saving on their wages, you know, not just make it all about, and there are some reports in Spain saying, no, 2024 is going to be the big one. They're going to get Mbappe and Haaland. You know, leave those guys to one side. Focus on making the team better next season. Start building with youth, and bring in the manager who can lead you, you know, in those next sort of 3 to 5 years. Real Madrid by all accounts, haven't done that. The managers that are on the market, you had Pochettino, you had Nagelsmann. Real Madrid generally don't do things very quietly, and there's been zero rumors that they've even talked to these people. So this to me suggests that, it really might be a case of Florentino continuing with Carletto another season.
Robbo, do you think that Real Madrid can rely on Toni Kroos and Luka Modric for another season?
No, I think Toni Kroos has done okay in recent weeks. I mean, he's been better than Modric. Modric has been out the side. He's been injured as well, but he hasn't played too many games. And I think they're coming to a level where Toni Kroos, playing as the holding midfield player, he can't defend. He's a player that lets people run off the back of him. Because Tchouaméni hasn't been at his very best, he's had to play in there. When he plays on the left-hand side, he's a much better player. And I agree with Gab. There's a lot of things that need rebuilding. Ancelotti, whether Ancelotti's given the chance to get new players in, sort of encourage the young players, make them better, and bring them into the side gradually. And next season, bring them into the side more than Toni Kroos and Modric. We have to wait and see. Or whether he brings a new manager in to bring these young players in and bring new players into the club. It's going to be a massive season for Real Madrid because I think some of their players are just a year too old, and it could really hit them hard next season.
Alex, how confident are Madrid of securing the services of Jude Bellingham?
They're confident. They feel they're the favourites right now ahead of Manchester City. But this has been a race where at different points in the race for Bellingham, we've thought that Liverpool were favourites, we've thought that City were favourites, and now we think that Real Madrid are the favourites. So that there could be further changes along the way. But they feel the player wants to come to Madrid. The only concern is whether Madrid can do a deal with Borussia Dortmund, because by all accounts, Madrid are looking to pay around 100 million euros for Bellingham. Dortmund would like something closer to 150. And City are standing by and waiting to see if that negotiation falls apart and whether they can still come in and pounce for Bellingham. On Ancelotti, I just wanted to say one thing on that. I do think that this transition idea, I think Ancelotti's actually done a pretty good job of managing that transition already so far. And I think we've seen that over the last year or so. We've seen the increasing importance of Vinicius Jr., of Rodrigo, of Fede Valverde, what Ancelotti's done with Camavinga, Tchouaméni, who started the season very well and hasn't been quite as important lately, the growing role of Militao in defence. So I actually think that Ancelotti's done I'm not sure many coaches could have done a better job than Ancelotti over the last year or so of managing that transition. I guess the question is whether a more radical transition is needed now and kind of a step further forward in terms of moving on from those midfielders, Kroos and Modric that you've mentioned, and from Benzema as well. Bellingham would be a big part of that midfield transition. I think that Tchouaméni, Camavinga and Bellingham is a midfield that you've got there potentially for the next 5 or 10 years. But replacing Karim Benzema, that's going to be that's the really tricky one, I think.
Well, yeah, let's talk about that, Alex. What's the plan there for a player to challenge him, to relieve him? What's the plan for a striker for Real Madrid?
They want to bring a centre-forward in this summer. The question is who? And they've been looking around, and there isn't an obvious candidate, I don't think. And remember, they've got a young Endrick coming in 2024 from Brazil, but he's very, very young, and he's still going to be very, very young in 2024. He won't necessarily be ready to come in and take over straight away from Benzema. So they will look to bring in a centre-forward this summer, because we've seen this season there's been an over-reliance on Benzema. And Benzema at 35, his body hasn't been able to take it. He's had these persistent injuries right through the season. And it's affected the team, and it's affected them at this key stage. So they know they need to bring a centre-forward in. But it's a difficult one, and it's an issue that Real Madrid have faced before. They previously looked to bring in backup strikers for Benzema. It hasn't gone very well. Think of someone like Luka Jovic, who they spent, 60 odd million euros on as their backup striker. Didn't work out, had to let him go for free in the end. So what kind of player can you bring in who knows that Benzema's still there for one more season, knows they aren't going to be first choice? It could be a younger player. It could be maybe a more experienced player who's happier to play a secondary role. Like I say, they've been looking at lots of options, but I'm not sure if they've identified the one that they want just yet. And some of those options are quite expensive. And with the money they're going to spend on Bellingham as well, they might not have a substantial amount to spend on a forward.
Well, thank you very much for watching ESPN on YouTube. For more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for live streaming, premium content, and let's not forget as well, ESPN FC 7 days a week. Subscribe to ESPN+.